4 people now, so I'm going to get started. Thank you all for joining us this morning. My name is Mike Minelli. I lead our Central U.S. Sales team and have had a number of different roles here with Automation Anywhere. We've got 2 partners joining us on our Digital Transformation Intelligent RPA in Unprecedented Times webinar. We've got 2 great partners with Fortress IQ, John Neasley and Shibumi with Ken Pellegrino. And each of us will be going through different sections where actually there's a story here. There's a digital kind of journey that people take as you start to look at, looking at automation and digital workforces and that. And we're going to kick off our presentation with our partner, Fortress IQ, then go to Shibumi, and then go to Automation Anywhere. When we look at kind of the world that we live in, and as customers over the last 3 or 4 years have dealt with trying to automate or build a digital workforce, these 3 organizations play a very important role. That first role at the very top, process discovery, process mining is a very important area, and an area that we see a lot of growth and high value from our customers in. And John is going to handle and take us through the Fortress IQ story. We then have Shibumi, who I love to call him a COE in a box, a digital COE in a box, because a lot of times when myself or my team is working with customers are really struggling to take all the intakes in and determine what are those high value processes and tasks to automate versus low value. They're all important and they all can have a role, but you can sequence them differently, and Ken will take you through that. And then lastly, at Automation Anywhere, I'll take you through our platform and our story and how we're better as an organization with partners like Fortress IQ and Shibumi feeding our systems, and vice versa, us returning data back to both those applications. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John.
Hey, thanks very much, Mike. I'm excited to present today with Automation Anywhere and Shibumi. You really can't find better partners in the market. And while we are all best-in-class providers on our own, when you put us together, that's when a number of technical capabilities are really unleashed, and the platforms can really be leveraged to their max. And when our solutions are combined, that's when we really deliver what I like to call sort of truly exponential value, and move from a world where 1 + 1 + 1 = 3 to one where 1 + 1 + 1 can equal 6 or 7 or even 8, because we really bring out the best in each other's technology. So again, very excited to be here, and thanks for having us, Mike. You can move on to that first slide. So let's start here. We obviously want to be respectful of the current challenges to business and society that everyone is facing today, and hope everybody is staying safe. But it's still imperative that companies transform to stay competitive and be successful in both the near and long term. And this is true today as much as it was 6-7 weeks ago before all this craziness started. And a 2019 survey of CEOs and senior executives found the #1 concern of leadership, the biggest risk to the organization was, this challenge of transformation. And at the same time, most companies are failing in this area, and 70% of transformation objectives are falling short of project goals. Of the 1.3 trillion that's spent on digital transformation last year, an estimated 900 billion was wasted when initiatives didn't meet their goals. But that's not the real paradox of enterprise transformation as I see it. And sort of here's the real paradox. Companies have failed to transform or suffered numerous false starts because the biggest obstacle to complex large-scale transformation is the lack of detailed knowledge on their current state activities. Companies have to transform to survive and prosper, but they don't truly understand how they currently operate. They have limited process understanding, don't know how their applications and data interact, don't truly understand what their customers expect. And, ultimately it's really hard to go from point A to point B if you don't know where point A actually is. So before embarking on a major initiative, to be successful, I argue that a company must map its processes, map its systems, and map its experiences before jumping on that transformation bandwagon. And today, despite what most companies will tell you, that necessary level of operational intelligence just does not generally exist in most companies. Mike, you can jump to that next slide. So, as you might imagine, Fortress IQ has created a platform to address this challenge, and we deliver real-time, end-to-end process insights for the modern enterprise. Our method enables organizations to make these data-driven decisions to successfully drive your most strategic business initiatives, from system optimization and process reengineering to stakeholder experience and augmented intelligence, the fancy word these days for automation. And the platform enables companies to fundamentally do three things: discover, document, and model current state operations. It starts with the raw video data that's captured via an installed lightweight software agent on target desktops. These agents automatically capture all the inputs and variations on the screen without disrupting your workforce or requiring any software integration. And that's really, a key differentiator. There's no API, no integration, no log files that you need access to. So projects can be deployed very rapidly.
And John, that's such a small agent. It even works on older like XP machines.
Yeah, it's a small agent
in plants, all types of like low end things where people forget automation is occurring or automation needs to occur.
It's a very low bandwidth requirement, light footprint, doesn't require a lot of resources. It is Windows based, but outside of that, it is a very simple, easy deployment to handle. So after we capture this data, it's then read by computer vision technology and converted into data. So this process is essentially taking the unstructured live activity information and turning it into a structured log file data source. And as you can imagine, this creates a massive proprietary data set of user activity that has never existed before for an organization and can really do incredible things with it. In the second stage, we or you can mine that data using natural language processing or machine and deep learning algorithms that can be explored to categorize, segment, find different patterns in the information. And this is the information that's used to discover and map all the relevant processes within the organization across any and all applications that your employees use. The final step that we have is the reporting and visualization of the data. And this is really shifting from data into insights to drive the business forward. We create consensus flows of the activities, which look a bit like Visio diagrams. We can provide insights into process variations and conformance. And we can also auto-generate the level 5 PDDs, the process design documents, to speed and scale, your RPA workflow programs. Finally, there's just the pure raw data and insights that are available to explore the operational activities of your organization and figure out, what applications are being used, how long they're being used, how effective they are, how many variations there are. All those metrics are available. So, very cool technology that can drive value quickly. As it says there on the bottom of the screen, typically in 2 to 4 weeks. And, compare this to traditional process mapping with consultants. I used to be one, so I understand this piece of it. There you're looking at engagements that are, 4 to 6 months, millions of dollars, lots of human resources required, which in this day and age is a challenge as well, with the travel restrictions. And also, I think this issue gets sort of swept under the rug a little bit. Lots of errors and omissions in those documents as well, because of just the natural biases that people have. They go through workshops, interviews, time motion studies. They want to always put their best foot forward, or give you the reason, or give you the process they think that you want to hear. So that's kind of our solution in a nutshell. Mike, you can jump to the next slide. So 2 quick takeaways on this one. First, as I mentioned in the opening, I wanted to give a sense of the project flow between Shibumi and Fortress IQ and Automation Anywhere. Once the areas of interest are identified, we automatically capture and map the processes as I just described. And then after that, the data can be leveraged internally or with partners to really help address the various business initiatives. That's really the second takeaway on this slide. The enterprise value targets that we can support. Automation there at the top is probably the most obvious one, as these struggle with scaling the RPA programs and sort of rapidly developing the PDDs for development, which we can auto generate. And again, you hear about scaling RPA programs. It's not an issue with the technology. Every program I've been involved with, the issue is getting the analysis and documentation to the developers fast enough, because the tools are so efficient and the developers are so efficient that they get ahead of the BAs and the consultants too often. And that's the real challenge to scaling, an RPA program. Let me touch on the others as well. Obviously, operational excellence. Companies are under increasing pressure, especially today, to streamline operations, and it's a tough, if not impossible, job. Without the data to identify, what's the best course of action that you should take. Otherwise you're relying on gut. The data and analytics aspect of our work should be fairly obvious, since we're providing that level of granular operational data that has just not previously been available to companies before. With conformance and compliance, platform can really leverage to provide, ongoing and continuous monitoring of activity, and alerts can be set when certain thresholds are exceeded, or there's a unnecessary operational risk. The system can make that alert to review what's going on. And finally, you've got stakeholder experience, either employee, customer, partner, whatever that key stakeholder is. And I'm not going to address this one now, because the next slide goes into a case study that we can explore quickly. And Mike, you can jump to that next slide. There it is. So this case study explores, the customer experience angle of our work and the impact of our technology around account activation for one of our clients. I like to use this one because too often in our field, the typical case studies are around financial use cases such as procure to pay or order to cash. And, everybody's seen those a million times. So this client was really struggling with a 23-minute AHT, which is average handling time, around dispatching technicians for certain new accounts. The client had tried going through the traditional BA consultant route to support the automation, and, struggled with lag time and documentation gaps. Our software was brought in and really put to the test and delivered 100% coverage across all the systems, auto-generated the necessary PDDs, and really without any disruption to the workforce. Ultimately, we were able to drive about $3.5 million in reduced operational expenses, and the process was accelerated by 20%. NPS and other customer service scores also improved, and really great win for our approach, and quickly demonstrated the value of our platform to the client. Next slide, Mike. So this is kind of wrapping up now. Let me summarize the key Fortress IQ value drivers in one place. We've really touched on all of them throughout the session, so no real reason to dwell on them, but can be helpful to see them all together. Again, just want to stress any process, any application across the enterprise, and nobody in our market that we've seen can scale at this level. Again, this is a massive data set of your organization's activity that we're delivering that can be mined for business initiatives across the board, as we discussed. Just a massive time to value improvement over the traditional model, especially the consultants. Our customers, clients are really seeing value in 2 to 4 weeks. That's how quickly this can be delivered versus 4 to 6 months for the traditional consulting route. And again, some of that is the deployment, because again, no integrations, no APIs, but it's also the fact that this is we don't do a ton of professional services. We don't really have any professional services associated with the product. Again, auto-generate the level 5 PDDs to really speed the development of automations. Next one, not really addressed specifically, but our approach, again, is more complete and less biased than the traditional model, because you're getting such a large data set. Any little adjustments that people make because they think they're being monitored, or there's a time motion study going on, or they're being asked to describe what they do in a workshop environment, that's eliminated with our technology. So again, we think we're providing a more comprehensive and less biased insight into the organization. And along those lines, again, finally, no impact on the workforce. Virtually no disruption. They're not pulled out of their job, don't have to go to workshop, don't have to the deployment's pushed out automatically of the software agent. They don't have to click anything to start the recording, any of that stuff. It is just simply captured, and they can move on with their day. And Mike, you can jump to that last slide. Finally, this quote probably, sums it up better than anything I could have said over the past 15, 16 minutes or so. After 2 weeks, you guys know our business better than we do. And, that came from an insurance company. And again, that could have probably summed up my entire presentation in 30 seconds there, but that's really, ultimately at the end of the day, what we're trying to provide and give organizations that level of insight into their operations that they've never been able to do before, and at the same time allow them to successfully accelerate their transformation automation initiatives.
John, that was great.
That's everything I had, Mike.
Yeah.
So thank you, and looking forward to answering questions at the end of the session here.
I think it's a great, now as we transition to Ken, it's like, okay, well, now that we know or identified these processes and areas to automate, how do we prioritize them? And so with that, Ken, and when we look at where the 3 organizations fit, from Fortress IQ to Shibumi to Automation Anywhere, now, Ken, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yeah, no, that's great. And John, it's always funny to listen to your talk, because it's just like yourself. I'm a former process guy by heart. So doing process analysis and process workshops was literally we did until we started Shibumi in 2012 was all about process background. So to see this always just makes me think of all the stories of sitting in those and trying to build those processes out over weeks. It's really spectacular what you guys do. So thanks again, Mike, for putting this together. We appreciate it, the opportunity. But as Mike mentioned, we're kind of the piece that in the middle there that is what Shibumi is all about. And you can just go to the next, you can probably actually skip to the next 2 slides here. But voice with the name, obviously, Ken Pellegrino with Shibumi. I'm the strategic chief strategy officer for the firm, and kind of my responsibility and what we do every day is we wake up and work with kind of our partners and our customers to help them maximize the value that they get out of their strategic transformation program. So John had mentioned the concept of these kind of enterprise transformational types of programs and the challenges that those face. That's actually what we saw 8 years ago when we started Shibumi, is the idea of creating a platform that allowed across all kinds of strategic investments, whether they be enterprise cost takeout, post-merger integration, any sort of transformational program where value becomes the thing that you need to drive, not just how fast are we, or not just how far along we are in our process, but how much value are we driving and returning back to the business, was the genesis for Shibumi as a whole. And as we started the firm and we started executing on these large transformational programs with a lot of our advisory partners. So as you mentioned, we're not a firm that does the work. We're not an advisory firm from that perspective. We provide a piece of technology that large enterprises use, as well as large advisory firms use. But as we worked with those firms, it became apparent to us the value that automation could have a couple years ago, in terms of even taking the concept of, I want to cut 100 million or $1 billion out of my supply chain or out of my operations, and applying those same concepts to automation became really important. As we've noticed, and you can see it right here, we've all read charts, we've all seen articles, we've all heard stories about crossing the chasm and the challenges organizations are having in terms of really scaling their automation program. And as part of the work that we've done, we've sort of noticed some trends, and this is kind of the stuff that we've set out to try to help solve. And as organizations get started and start working in automation programs, you see the concept that there's not a single enterprise view for a lot of these investments. And that's because the organizations spin up and there are different pockets of automation that happen across different aspects, especially when you get into these large organizations. So you end up with kind of, I don't want to say competing, but disparate groups that are using spreadsheets and different spreadsheets and PowerPoint slides and trying to loosely connect to each other, and having that single consolidated view of how the organization is executing and performing on its automation journey becomes a challenge. And then as those programs get started, you tend to see that the lenses, and rightfully so in the very beginning, is focused on the technical delivery. Do we have the skills? Do we have the capability to actually automate a process and be able to take it from an idea to deployment and actually manage it? But as you're focused on those technical delivery aspects, not having an eye on the value and the identification of whether we're executing on the right processes right up front can become a challenge. And that challenge really manifests a little bit down the road when an organization is looking to, as it gains traction, really start to scale and communicate the value that automation has back to the business. The visibility, because we have different groups and different kind of methods and approaches, we haven't taken value as a component of what we want to do in the very beginning. Visibility to the results, the impact that the program is having right up front becomes a challenge. And that's what we set out to do. And that's the background you see in the product. So if you can go to the next slide, Mike. And so we're the path. You can actually go one slide past. This is probably a little easier. We're the aspect of the middle. Go up one. Sorry about that. I meant the one with the workflow on it. I'll just describe real quick what we're doing. In this scenario, and appreciate it again, John, the work that gets done with our partners Fortress IQ in this scenario, but our end-to-end lifecycle management really helps an organization communicate both, I'd say, almost the health and the wealth of the program and the impact it has back to the business by really trying to take a holistic end-to-end approach to kind of managing, as Mike mentioned, even the digital COE in a box. So what does that really mean? It means taking value in the content, the process information that's being gathered by Fortress IQ. And in addition to that, allowing for people in the business just to solicit ideas from their day-to-day work where they have an idea for an automation, but consolidating all of that into a single place where we can do, as we've talked about, the ability to create both quantitative and qualitative scoring methods to assess strategic alignment, value in terms of dollars, hours saved, error reductions, lots of ways to sort of quantify the impact that an automation candidate could have. But having all of them together means I can compare and contrast them and size them in comparison to each other, and really, in essence, build out a complete business case, not only for a whole set of automations, but each one on its own, and then take that automation from business case analysis, prioritization, sign off to say we're going to execute and we're going to deploy a set of automations to help solve these issues. And then in the platform, we can then track the delivery, the timelines, the activities, the dates, the work that's being done, the checklists to ensure that we're ready to deploy, and manage that all the way through to delivery. So when we're actually off and deploying and it's been deployed within Automation Anywhere, the real interesting part comes into play where we have an ability then to go reach into and actually extract back the performance numbers out of the control room, out of bot insights, and integrate that back into our platform to help compare the actual performance. So how is the process executing? How are digital workers performing in comparison to the business cases that were created? So that we really get an understanding of, we expected to have X impact, we signed off on that, we've been delivering at X+1, X+Y from an impact perspective, and having that view so that it's not just a PowerPoint or a spreadsheet that gets put on a SharePoint site about how much value we're going to deliver. It's really something that we're tracking and then using to compare and analyze against the execution data to really try to give an end-to-end view of what the platform's doing. And that's kind of what our platform does holistically. And then by putting all of that into an individual app, right, that's where you get to, you can go to the next slide, Mike. That's where you get to doing, and here's some just screenshots of some of the work we do with Automation Anywhere, is tracking that automation program data is what we can do to provide, think of it now as a single source of truth is what a lot of people like to call it, to take all the aspects of what happens in a COE, everything from the multiple spreadsheets and PowerPoint slides, and piecing that together along with the key KPIs that measure performance, as well as things such as like the status and the progress of each automation, and rolling that into a single app that allows you to kind of communicate that back up and alleviates a lot of the work, the data gathering, the status checking that goes on with the COE, and kind of turns all that into an automated system. So I actually just got off of a call with Mike, an Automation Anywhere customer that's looking at this and tracking the same component because they just spent the last 2 weeks building out their key KPIs for an executive presentation for this year's investment in automation. And having a platform like this is what they're looking to take on because of the idea that it's now available constantly. They don't have to do that work every single time. It's just available immediately. And besides just tracking the automation data, you can go to the next one, is then how do we gather that data is because we're tracking all of it together as part of the pipeline. It's no longer, an idea is no longer just a row in a spreadsheet. It wasn't just a concept. It has all the data that's wrapped around it from the analysis that Fortress IQ is able to do, and then take that data and actually manage it through a stage-gated process where we're actually tracking the workflow. We're tracking approvals of an item going from business case sign-off to delivery, managing the checklists to ensure that we've dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's before we go off and deploy something. And having all of that organized in here becomes a really nice way to help track the progress and help ensure that we're taking the appropriate steps to move an idea from ideation all the way through the delivery. And having, again, all that data together, and go to the next slide, takes all of that and allows you to really make what we call value-focused decisions. And what does that really mean? It means taking all of this data, the performance data around automations to date, all the business case information, and now putting it into a place where we can create really impactful, but really easy to digest and navigate charts and visualizations. So I can compare a set of candidates, which automations I want to work on, or how's our program executing, and plot them out on simple charts where we've all seen kind of bubble charts where up and to the right is a good place to be. We can take those candidates for automation and plot them out to help an organization make a better decision about, we have two candidates, they have some general characteristics that are the same, but comparing and plotting them out on all kinds of different ways to analyze them helps us ensure that we're executing on the processes that are going to have the biggest impact, the biggest bang for the buck, versus just simply the low-hanging fruit from that perspective. And then finally, on that last bullet point there, is the stakeholder reporting. I touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think if oftentimes we talk to folks that are working within the COE for their automation program, and that's what they're looking to have some help with. I would say easily 75, 80, maybe 80+% of the time is spent generating those reports, like I was just talking about with the folks I talked about right before this call, where they're going through and building out all of these stakeholder reports. And as the programs grow, as the word gets out about automation internally, the idea of generating reports and status and communicating it with different slices to the executive teams becomes even more and more important. And it almost becomes like your own mini marketing event. Well, Shibumi, a long time ago, working with some of our business partners, crafted the idea of, could we automate that and actually automate the idea of gathering that data, sequencing it to help tell a story, and actually generating cadence-based reports directly out of the product, presentations, if you will, that allow you to communicate back without having to force people to go to a dashboard every single time. You also can generate that monthly status report, that weekly cadence review, sliced by work stream, whichever way you'd like to deliver it, to allow you to really communicate back what kind of impact this program is having to the various stakeholders that are out there. So it's no longer about having them go in and hunt and peck. I can deliver the message in exactly the way I want to frame it directly back to my business stakeholders. And if you just go to the next slide, this was my, I think this is my last slide. And you know, hopefully that makes a little bit of sense in terms of having an end-to-end kind of view of what the app does. And what we see is when the organizations have a disparate set of techniques, spreadsheets and PowerPoints that are all over the place, they have an ad hoc process where people are horse trading about what opportunities they should automate and things of that nature. You end up with, I'd say, ad hoc, almost disparate kind of value. What we've seen and what we generally see when we work with organizations is the ability for us to be able to take a centralized approach allows for us, based on whatever thing you're looking to focus on, growth of the pipeline, whichever way you want to measure it, savings that are being pulled into the funnel, savings that's being delivered, dollar impact that's going on, our ability to end-to-end be able to communicate and drive not only how much have we delivered and the impact it's having on the business, but also what are we working on right now, as well as the backlog, allows us to communicate really a holistic value prop of what automation can bring to an organization. I mean, Mike, we oftentimes think about ourselves as like the fuel. We're like the fuel for the COE to really kind of enable itself to kind of expand and grow. And that's the type of work we do every day with both Fortress IQ and the Automation Anywhere teams. That's a little bit about Shibumi, and glad again to answer any questions.
Ken, one other two things real quick. So on your very first slide where you showed the chasm slide, I think a lot of people in our space think we're a hockey stick, you know, up and to the right. And I think we see a lot that 48% in that original where the laggards are not there, but are getting there now with COVID. And then the POC kind of players where they know they should be doing something, but they're not exactly sure what to do. And both, when you're using partners like Fortress IQ and you're using partners like Shibumi, you have a much better opportunity to kind of not get into that chasm and go, be in that hockey stick up and to the right, because the program itself is more successful earlier on and shows value within the organization and can grow and adds headcount to it and adds technology. It adds all kinds of different things to it because of what both Fortress IQ and what Shibumi bring to the table. Ken, one validation point for me was some of the partner ecosystem that you have on the Shibumi side. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I don't think you play it up a lot for particular reasons, but I think it's really important to understand who are some of the partners that are actually using Shibumi in a way where people on this call, many might realize that it's Shibumi.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, and I appreciate that. So, yeah, when we started in 2012, we started working, as you can imagine, as I mentioned, on very large-scale transformational programs, and it's what we kind of created the product to help support. And so, when you're working on a transformation program that has, a 7, 8, 9-figure objective in hand, those programs are managed by large-scale firms. Those are managed by the Bains of the world, the Alex Partners, the KPMGs, Accentures. Those are the folks that actually help an organization get organized and execute on those programs. And so we set out with right from the very beginning to create an application that was really enabled to help support those firms and also support them in a way that makes their approach still be unique in terms of how they go to market. So what we created in the platform became a really flexible solution to allow for each of those firms to, in essence, almost white label our product, really create their secret sauce in terms of how they assess, how do they prioritize, how do they manage a COE and stand up a COE for their customers, and put that into a software that allows them to go to market and deliver that value for their firm, for their customers, which ultimately become Shibumi customers. So that whole journey for us started with a lot of work that we were doing with Bain, and then moved into a lot of the firms that focused a lot on automation, which are the KPMGs, the EYs, the Accentures, Deloittes of the world. And oftentimes when you see the work that we're doing with them has been, you'll see a product that they have enabled that they're released in the marketplace, and actually behind the scenes, it's a powered by Shibumi solution.
Right.
It doesn't have our name front and center to it. It's just one that's sitting out there. And even outside of the big ones, you can, the sort of large enterprise audit and advisory firms, the very boutique firms like a Reveal Group, and those folks also use our platform in that same model and same format. And they've been great partners for us. It's one of those great kind of validation points that allow
it was a big validation point for me when I started to see, those applications out there. So, Ken, you want to end with your last slide here?
People always ask, right? The sort of what does that mean? The name itself always gets a lot of connotation. So, it stands for effortless perfection. It's a Japanese term. It technically, truth be known, comes from a spy novel that really has very little to do with with business transformation, but the name translates to kind of maximum effectiveness with minimal effort, or effortless perfection, and that's kind of what we set out to do. And then, as we did research on the name, and besides just thinking it's a cool name, there became a lot of business connotation around lean and the sort of continuous improvement aspect, the lean principles with process improvement. There became a lot of philosophies around Shibumi, which is where our name came from. So
Ken, that's great. And so we're going to now move into the automation anywhere section. I'm going to get through ours in about 13 to 15 minutes, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Again, trying to make sure we stay consistent in our themes from our partner Fortress IQ, Shibumi, and then Automation Anywhere. We believe we are the leader in the digital development of the digital workforce, and we're starting to see especially in this crisis. And as John mentioned, when we kind of kick things off, we are in a completely different world right now. There's inflection points for companies where you have to, like I've been part of Netscape, I've been part of LoudCloud, I've been at Salesforce, I've been at companies where there were different inflection points that really, a crisis can make, can actually make a statement for an organization to say, yeah, there is a need for a digital workforce. And so the current crisis that we're in is something that's not to be, belittled at all, but what we're seeing from our customers is just astounding in terms of how those that were prepared and were able to turn on a dime to help their customers and maintain their business has been amazing. And I highly recommend you go to our website and you see some of the posts that our customers are making at our people community portals and things like that. It's been truly inspiring. The problem that we saw and we've been working on is this, after 20 years of automation technologies and all these different things that are happening, the majority of business processes are still manual, especially those that, are come between like cross application, cross department, cross functional areas of a company. And why is that? We see, like the augmentation of human labor with digital labor is front and center right now, especially in our crisis. Okay. You have on the left side, you have a variety of on-premise and cloud, systems, either from commercial vendors or homegrown in the enterprise. There's a big gap around that between, what is actually, what can be automated either through APIs or back-end, integrations. The humans are still touching a tremendous amount of these applications and going across these cross applications. And so there just tends to be a gap at times. And so even when you see, companies focusing 100% on APIs, you see companies focusing 100% on redesigning an app, there's still this human labor component that needs to be augmented by a digital workforce. And so what we are looking at Automation Anywhere and the solution that we're trying to, to promote and to, deliver across the globe is how do we take knowledge workers? How do we help those enterprises that have the knowledge worker develop a digital workforce? How does it interact with every system that enterprise has to deal with? And how do we help them, deliver the processes and automations around that? That's the 80%. That's the big picture items that we're trying. And it's really hard. And it's gotten way harder in the current crisis that we're in, because you don't have the ability right now to maybe look across the cubicle and say, hey, how are we doing it like that? You're very disparate and very broken in terms of, having the human connection that you typically rely on. So defining this intelligent digital workforce has been our mantra for the last 2 or 3 years. As an organization, we've been around longer than that, but we've been really pushing the envelope on this intelligent digital workforce, probably the longest out of any vendor that's been out there. What we view as a digital workforce is multiple components. There's the enterprise RPA layer. That's kind of the nuts and bolts, where you can build attended automations or unattended automations. One of the great things that both Fortress IQ and Shibumi help us with is determining, what's the value of attended? How do we help in that customer service and experience world? Unattended, mission critical back office type automations, and how do we pull those together? How do we cut across different organizations, like think about a supply chain? Unattended, mission critical digital worker, that's a very, very tough kind of application. We couple that then with cognitive and intelligence, like our IQBot platform, which is an AI platform that sits on top of the RPA enterprise platform that we have. And so now you've got unstructured data, you've got UI automation in that, you've got predictive process outcomes. So once we understand behavior, we can kind of predict what that next step might be. Or when there's an error in a process, how do we quickly, we've seen that before, how do we quickly jump in and fix that, and again, keep it away from a human. Couple that with smart analytics that we have with Bot Insight, where we can provide the operational and the business insights. And again, this stuff flows back, is in our platform, but can flow back to other systems and help them be more intelligent, like Shibumi and Fortress IQ. And I think the big picture is this, our digital, our bot store and the digital workforces that are being pre-componentized and the ecosystem that we have as an organization. We actually are working on some technologies that overlap a little bit with our partners. Every, kind of large platform player has some of that. But in the reality, just like when I was at Salesforce or other organizations, you always have a little bit of that potentially, of that overlap. And, we're building this entire digital workforce platform. We will have, table stakes in certain areas that we need to do, but we're also going to have very, very strong partnerships with the Shibumis of the world, the Fortress IQs, the Microsofts, the SAPs, all the other different players that are out there that we need to, that our customers are dealing with, that we need to work with. Why leverage a digital workforce? What's important about a digital workforce? Why is it important? So obviously the things that jump to the top at first, like optimizing labor costs and increasing capacity, like in the crisis that we're in right now, that's still a pretty important milestone to hit. But number two, increasing speed, accuracy, availability. This is where what we really started to see with a lot of our customers really kind of come to fruition. It's like, how can we continue to keep the lights on when we're remote? We're dealing with, companies where they're trying to keep their owner operators in business. How do we help, banks, our banking customers process, PPP applications much faster? How do we look at fraud detection? I mean, there's so many different things that with the crisis that customers are now being re-challenged with, that we've had to kind of turn our technology, a little bit, not on its head, but in a direction that, they may have thought it was important at some point, but now they think it's really important because they have this, they have this backlog and they have this need where they didn't think it was important. How do we help customers, help their customers get to banking customers so that they can get to their loans and the SBA processes, et cetera. So it's a completely different world that we're in. When we were giving this presentation, maybe, 60, 90 days ago, we may have thought of things, very differently, but the impact of what we're seeing customers, dealing with, some of these, are just really top of mind right now. Improve compliance, controls, and audibility. This is just a huge area for many organizations right now. I mean, like, they've got to be able to look backwards and know, even throughout this crisis, like what happened and when. How do we report against that? We've got fiduciary responsibilities. We got to make sure that we're able to, pull up that information and show our CEOs what's happening. We have a major bank as a customer that, just announced their earnings, and number 3 on the list of things that they were very grateful for and that they were doing well was all around automation and how they were able to quickly turn on a dime for their customers and process, unbelievable amount of typically would have been paper to get their customers, the loans that they needed to keep themselves going. Deliver this business intelligence. Why? Why do this? Why shouldn't we do this? Why should we do more of it? That's really, the essence of what a lot of the companies are looking for from the business intelligence is, tell us what we should be doing and how much more we should be doing of it, or what we shouldn't be doing. Enabling this digital transformation. Ken and John both talked about it, different, areas in their presentations. And John had a very large number out there for, the amount of money spent on digital transformation that seems to be wasted because they didn't have the foresight. They didn't have the ability to know what they wanted to automate, when they wanted to automate it, what the true value of that automation would be. And again, some people there's some very high, volume, automations that can be done for organizations that don't have high ROIs tied to them, but still need to be done. Like something simple like password reset. Things like that aren't going to come with a huge ROI, but from a convenience and experience factor are huge in terms of making the organization easier to deal with and making work fun and things like that. And again, enhancing employee morale. We've heard a lot of great stories lately from customers in terms of just being super thankful that they had the automation program in place when they did, because they've been able to get a tremendous amount of value out of it. Here's just some quotes from different customers that we have out there. These aren't specific to the crisis that we're in right now. I'll make sure I put that out there, because these are quotes that we've had. We are starting to develop some very specific ones to what we're seeing happening in today's world. But when you look at hours saved, or security, or quick wins, or simple plug and play, cost savings of 40%, those are just some things that jump out at you to make you, feel good about, if you can plan properly in the front of building out your program with the proper process discovery, and then being able to evaluate things, you get some very, very big wins here. And then here's when we start to look at some of the global customers that we're dealing with, 3,100 plus across the globe, we're clearly on a path that is providing value, but it takes great partnerships, it takes great customers, it takes a company like Automation Anywhere that's willing to listen and change. And I feel like we're going to get through this crisis and be a better organization, be able to do some things better for our customers, and continue to grow with our partners. So with that, we've got about 8 minutes left to go through Q&A. I think our marketing team, Kelsey and Heather, we were going to unmute. And so if people want to just go ahead and ask some questions, we'd be happy to answer them for you.
Hey guys, this is Ted Perkovich with Atos. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hey, Ted.
Yeah.
I have a kind of a strategic question, probably for John and Ken, actually. So what level of maturity are you seeing with customers who are starting out and ultimately would be willing to adopt this kind of integrated strategy of soup to nuts opportunity to monitoring type of approach to essentially automating their COE with respect to the collection of these tool sets like you have?
Ken, you want to start off?
Sure. So thanks, Ted. Thanks for the question. If you think about kind of what we're doing from that perspective, and I even mentioned it in the beginning of my slides, the idea of getting involved early as you're just trying to get your feet wet in automation, but having a focus on kind of the value side of it, along with building up the technical chops to deliver, becomes really critical in the very beginning to get those initial proof points squared away. So what we end up having to do, and we've done it multiple times, is in the solution is there may be a lot of capabilities in there. So kind of scaling that down to really fit the journey that an organization is on becomes really important, because you do need to help identify and help support an organization with its quick wins, and allow somebody to get started small in that scenario. But as part of getting those quick wins, really be able to communicate that or sort of market it to the rest of the firm is one of those little points that helps kind of drive an inflection point or help drive the scale. So I still think getting involved early helps. It just means that the amount of effort, the amount of work that somebody's doing as part of their COE may be a little bit shifted to, let's identify whether we have the skills to be able to deliver, how fast we can deliver, and the value that we can deliver it against becomes kind of the things that we focus on. John, I'll turn it over. I'm sure you want to add something to that.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ken, and thanks for the question, Ted. I think, we are not, definitely not the first stop on your automation journey. We tend to come in, once the low-hanging fruit has been automated and people have gotten their feet wet in RPA or DPA, whatever the technology may be, and need that additional level of insight to figure out, okay, where do I go next? Just as a sort of data point, a number of our clients have come to us with, they've got licenses for X number of bots from, any of the RPA vendors, whoever it may be, and they can't, get to the scale that they need to get to fully utilize, their licenses that they've already purchased. So, we come in to help accelerate and speed that process to, get them to more fully utilize their investment that they've made in RPA. And that's happened with 2 or 3 clients, as well as a number of folks in our pipeline as well have come to us with just that sort of gap between, what they've purchased and what they're actually utilizing, and try to help us close the gap there.
And Ted, it's a great question. I've been in this game now since 2018, and I saw a need for it. Actually, the appetite was there for customers to come in and purchase like the kind of the entry level enterprise package. And we would do things for them in a very manual.
Yes.
We would do
Sounds like an idea for
botathons
sure.
and a number of crowdsourcing type initiatives to help them figure out where to go. And I'm a kind of a disciple of Mark Andreessen, and at Netscape and Loud Cloud. And so as you look at Mark's theory over the years in terms of software eating the world, I knew at some point, just insightfully, we were going to build, there was going to be the opportunity to have a digital footprint at the beginning, the middle, that leads up to the automations. And so I believe that, for those customers that have already, kind of jumped in with their RPA vendors, hopefully the majority of them being Automation Anywhere, and bringing in technologies like Fortress IQ and Shibumi, us working at the front end with new logos where they can start with that, and then much more quickly ramp to 50, 100 to 1,000 automations. I think you're going to see both of that happening in the industry.
Cool. Thanks, guys.
Any other questions out there?
There you go. I'll take that silence.
I think everybody wants to get to lunch, Mike.
Yeah, I think silence is golden.
Okay, all right, guys. We'll end the video here, or the webinar here. I again want to thank John and Ken for their time, and everybody for joining. I wish everybody, for their families to be safe. As we get through this crisis, feel free to reach out to us or any of the 3 organizations that have been on this call, and we'd be happy to help. Also, I highly recommend, coming to the website as well as to our people community portals, where you can see what customers are posting and sharing about their experiences right now. And just wish everybody have a great rest of their week, and appreciate you taking an hour with us.
Appreciate it as well. Thanks again for coordinating, Mike, and everybody stay safe out there.
Thank you. Have a good day.